Hello guys, my name is Vashik and welcome to my channel. And in this video I would like to talk about the origins of the cult of productivity that is so popular right now. I believe that understanding the roots of the cult of the productivity will reveal a lot about its strengths and weaknesses. In the first part of this video I would like to tell you about the Soviet economic experiment that went out of control in the early 20th century. I believe that this economic experiment reveals so much about the productivity and efficiency and how it works. In the second and third part of the video, I would like to explore one great book that I've recently read. It was written by Oliver Burkeman and it's called 4,000 Weeks. It changed my outlook on how I perceive and treat my time and generally the idea of time management. I hope that by the end of this video you will look at the whole productivity cult and its ideas through a completely different perspective. The ideas that were mentioned in this book focus on not how to make us more efficient and more productive, but are more about how we can have more meaningful focus and more enjoyment from what we do. So let's start with the Soviet experiment. Although I grew up in Russia and studied at Russian school, none of my textbooks mentioned this economic reform I believe that is a bit crazy. The author of this idea was the first Soviet economist. His name was Yuri Larin. He decided to introduce what he called 5-day week. The problem that Larin had that people enjoyed weekends, which meant that at least for one day in a week, all factories stopped working. This was disastrous for the Soviet economy that was struggling. So his 5-day week meant that workers would work for 4 days, then we'll have the 5th day off. But this was the best part of the plan, because the second part of the plan was to divide the entire Soviet population into 5 groups that would be marked by color. So the red group, for example, would start and they would work for 4 days and have the 5th day off. But the blue group, let's say, would start the day after the red group started, and they would also work for 4 days and will have the 5th day off, and so on and so on. So according to Larin's plan, workers would be very happy because they would have weekends more often, and the factories in the Soviet Union would never stop producing goods and will be super efficient. Larin actually didn't come up with this idea himself. He borrowed it from the first management consultant who was American, whose name was Frederick Winslow Taylor. Taylor, as many industrialists, didn't much care about the well-being of their workers. What he cared about was efficiency and how can he make profit. But after implementing this strategy for 11 years, the Soviet Union abandoned it for multiple reasons, but the primary reason was, of course, it caused complete chaos. Because in many cases, friends couldn't meet and even family members couldn't meet because nobody had the weekend at the same time. The reason why I'm talking about the Soviet experiment is because I believe that the ideas of those industrialists have migrated into our 21st century, and it no longer impacts our work life, but also impacts how we treat our hobbies, our leisure time, and I believe that we demand from ourselves the same level of productivity and efficiency as those industrialists demanded from their workers. But in our case, the industrialist and the worker is the same person. And after reading Oliver Burkeman's book, I became convinced that this has a severe impact on our mental health in general. There are already many videos out there that criticize the productivity and efficiency and they try to rebrand it, but I decided to focus more on how we came up with the productivity at the first place, because I believe that it will reveal much more about how we should actually treat our time and perceive time in general. Oliver Burkeman brings a brilliant example that illustrates how our perception of time has changed. Let's imagine, for example, an English farmer sometime in 15th century. This English farmer's focus was his tasks, and he didn't much care how much time would they take. All he cared about completing them when it was required. So for example, when the crops needed harvesting, he didn't calculate how much time it would take, whether he will need 4 hours, 5 hours. All he needed to do is to harvest the crops before they were destroyed or got wilted. His focus was on a task and not time. While with the Industrial Revolution, this mindset changed in workers. They started perceiving their value in the hourly rate. Burkeman brings a modern example. He brings an example of modern lawyers who charge $300 per hour. So for the modern lawyer to spend an extra hour with their family would mean losing $300 that they could earn if they stayed at work. So when it comes to the scales and they have to look whether to spend an extra time with the family or an extra time at work, it's often very tempting to choose the second one to go and earn those extra $300. Oliver Burkeman mentions the fact that historians, of course, debate those numbers, but the average farmer in England back 5 centuries ago would have at least 150 days off, so half of the year they would spend on leisure. And of course, one of the reasons why people back then wanted to become rich was to have more leisure time, while today even the rich people try to become even more productive than they are to increase their output. The second point that is kind of the kernel of all this productivity code that explains psychologically why we try to squeeze so much into our time revolves around the title of this book, which is 4,000 weeks. 4,000 weeks refer to our average lifespan. So if we live till the age of 80, this is how many weeks we will have. One of the key things that Burkeman mentions is that in order to quit this productivity race that won't bring us anywhere, is to acknowledge that we are limited, that we have a finite amount of time on this planet. And of course, this is a very morbid and very dark thought, and this is actually the reason why we refuse to admit it. But Burkeman mentions, and I agree completely, is the fact that once we acknowledge that we have limited time on this earth, we will spend a lot of time thinking about what is truly valuable to us. Productivity cult often promises to us that if we will just be able to organize our weekly calendar the right way, we will be able to accomplish everything, absolutely everything. A single lifetime is not enough to read all the books that were ever published. Actually, there is not even enough time to read all the great books in a single lifetime. Once we acknowledge our limits, our focus becomes even deeper. We will be able to identify what is important and what is not. And this is the key of Burkeman's book. First of all, the realization that the valuable things are not measured by hours or days, but are measured in a different form, in a form that you will be able to find after you acknowledge that your time is limited. Those two ideas about time and the fact that we should acknowledge our limits, those two ideas had a really strong impact on my approach to productivity and how I treat productivity. But I spent even more time thinking about the third idea that I would like to mention, is the fact that we demand from all our activities, whether it is our work or our hobbies, to have some kind of results in the future. The results that might never come. And this creates a lot of anxiety when those results that you expect never come around. Every task focuses on the future results. We never do anything for enjoyment's sake. Hobby is the name of the task or activity that you enjoy doing but never expect to have any result. For example, I personally like drawing, but I'm not going to even risk showing my drawings on this channel. And while I would like to improve, I would like to draw better, I don't demand from myself to become great painter. We must have those kind of tasks in our lives. They ground us, they make us more present. Because in our modern day, perhaps these are the only tasks that we do just because we enjoy it. All other our pursuits, whether it is work, fitness, YouTube channel, anything, any other project, we demand from those projects to be successful, to have more followers, to lose weight. And of course, Burkeman covers much more in his book. But those three ideas had really profound impact on me. I stopped measuring activities by the amount of time that they require. I just give them as much time as they would need. As long as I enjoy them and as long as I know that I'm present while I'm doing it, it really doesn't matter. Once you break away from this industrial productivity mindset and you look at your life through the lens of a limit, of enjoyment, of being present, it kind of changes your perception. And of course, I would like to really recommend you to read this book. It's called, once again, 4,000 Weeks, Time and How to Use It. It was published on the 28th of August of this year, just recently. And I actually made a separate web page on my website. It will be linked down below, where I added all the books that Oliver Burkeman refers to. I added all the quotes, key ideas, and a couple of other cool things like podcasts with him that you can listen and go deeper. And of course, this is the part of the video where I plug in kind of the things that I do. I have my own podcast, which is called Artidote. I interview writers and authors and artists, so if you are interested, go check out. There's a podcast where I discuss productivity. Also, you can find it down below. And I also have a monthly newsletter where I summarize all the books that I've read. And after reading Oliver Burkeman's book, I started thinking about this YouTube channel, my newsletter that I send monthly. I started thinking about my podcast where I interview authors and artists. All the links will be down below. But I started thinking whether I do those tasks, whether I have this YouTube channel, newsletter, and podcast because I want to be productive, because I want some kind of a future result, or am I doing it because I actually enjoy it? And the answer is I actually enjoy it. It was actually a great question to ask myself. So if you have a project and you have doubts about it, ask yourself, if this project would fail in a year or in a month, whenever, would you still be doing it because you enjoy it, or you just do it for the future results that might never arrive? Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. If you got so far into this video,